Paul Lynde made people laugh, but his life was a lonely, painful tragedy behind the scenes. Lynde was known for his razor-sharp wit and unforgettable voice on Hollywood squares. But behind closed doors he was fighting inner problems and hiding his sexuality in a harsh time. He died alone in his Hollywood home, forgotten, confused, and heartbroken after years of fame. This is what he left behind. A house that was empty, a life that was kept secret, and a wealth that only told part of the story. You might not know this about Paul Lynde, but he was actually pretty dark inside, and it followed him around a lot in his personal life. Actually, Lynde had a serious drinking problem for many years, which hurt his health, job, and relationships with friends and co-workers, even though he was funny on screen. In the 1960s and 1970s, Lynde's drinking problems became clearer through his increasingly unstable behavior and frequent run-ins with the law. He was arrested many times for being drunk in public, and people who knew him well started to notice how he changed when he drank. Peers who have known Lynde for a long time, like Hollywood Squares host Peter Marshall and actress Kay Ballard, say that Lynde could become extremely cruel when he was drunk. When Lynde was drunk, he wasn't the funny, charming person he seemed to be on TV. He was sometimes violent and often made fun of his own friends in a way that hurt even long-lasting friendships. On July 18, 1965, Lynde was involved in an event that would bother him forever. It was likely the saddest event in his life. While living at the Sir Francis Drake Hotel in San Francisco, Lynde was drinking a lot with his friend James Bing Davidson, a young actor who is 24 years old. Their hotel room was said to be full of horseplay after hours of drinking. Davidson tragically died when he jumped from the 8th floor window. Later, the Associated Press said that Davidson's fall was a mistake and that Lynde was not to blame. However, the event had a big effect on Lynde's emotions. Seeing a friend die in such a horrible way left him with deep psychological scars that made his drinking and emotional problems worse. In October 1977, more than a decade later, there was another very bad public event. People were angry when Lynde went back to Northwestern University to be the Grand Marshal for the homecoming parade after making racist comments and gestures toward James P. Pitts, a black professor at the school, in a fast food place after the parade. The shocking behavior caused a stir, and Lynde later said that his rude actions were caused by being tired and drunk. Even though it might have been true, it wasn't enough to protect him from the public and professional backlash. The next time Lynde got in trouble with the law was in January 1978, while he was in Salt Lake City to record a show for Donnie and Marie. When Lynde found out that someone broke into his car while he was drinking in a nearby pub, he yelled at the police to focus on his case instead of another investigation that was already going on. Because of what he did, he was arrested for fighting with a police officer. Even though the charges were later dropped, the event made him even more of a troubled and unstable figure. Even though there were more and more problems, Lynde finally looked for a turning point. Around the beginning of 1980, he allegedly decided to change his life for the better by giving up drugs and alcohol. After a while, his friends said that his efforts to get clean were real and that he had behaved much better. But the years of trouble, being embarrassed in public, and hiding their pain had hurt them physically and mentally. In the early days of January 1982, people close to the famous comedian Paul Lynde felt more and more uneasy. Lynde was known for his outrageous humor and frequent shows on Hollywood Squares. Lynde was supposed to be at a birthday party on January 10th. This is something he would usually go to without thinking twice. Friends Paul Barisi, an actress and model, became worried right away when Lynde didn't show up and couldn't be reached by phone. Barisi knew something was wrong. Barisi and fellow actor Dean Dittman tried to get in touch with Lynde several times by calling and knocking on his Beverly Hills home many times. When their efforts didn't lead to an answer, and their worry grew, Barisi made a decision. In the early hours of January 11, 1982, he broke into Lynde's house through a side door. The loud warning sound of the home's security bell broke the silence as soon as he walked in. This action gave us a very important clue. Since Lynde set the alarm before going to bed, it's likely that no one else has come or gone since then. Inside, Barisi saw a very sad scene. Paul Lynde was out of it in bed and not moving. It was clear right away that he had died. Barisi made it clear that Lynde had not been found naked, despite the sensationalized reports that spread later in the media. Not so, he told reporters later. Paul had on a robe and was in his jammies. It was important to have these specifics to dispel the tabloid-style rumors about his death and personal life. There were rumors in the news that Lynde had been entertaining a guest that night, who was then said to have left the scene of the crime, but there was never any proof to back up these claims. One of the strongest signs that Lynde had been alone was the loud alarm that met Barisi when he walked into the house. The Los Angeles County coroner said that the official cause of death was a major heart attack. Lynde was only 55 years old. It was a quiet and private funeral for a man whose crazy personality had captivated people for decades. Lynde had a big impact on American pop culture, especially in the 1970s, when his campy coded style gave gay viewers a voice long before it was widely accepted. He was known for his perfect timing, piercing voice, and exuberant energy. Lynde's body was burned and his ashes were buried at Amity Cemetery in Amity, Knox County, Ohio. This brought him back home to rest near where he came from. Along with his brother Johnny and sister Helen, his body was buried next to them. His parents, Sylvia and Hoy Corridon Lynde, and another brother, Corridon, who served in Juaut, were all buried in the same graveyard. It was a peaceful family gathering, a far cry from the chaos and glitz of Hollywood. The sudden death of Paul Lynde was sad for both his friends and his peers. Many people were saddened by both the loss of his comedic talent and the fact that he had to spend his last hours alone. A man who had made millions of people laugh died quietly in his own home, leaving behind both happy and sad memories. Paul Lynde really did live a life of two selves. One as a well-liked TV celebrity whose corny one-liners became famous, and the other as a very private man who was trying to figure out his sexuality in a time when morals were very strict. His on-screen character was bubbly and often laced with sexy hints, but the public and the press were not allowed to see his personal life. This was because of the strict unspoken rules of Hollywood in the middle of the 20th century. Even though Lynde worked in a field where being gay could cost you your job, it was pretty well known that she was gay. But it was rarely if ever mentioned in the news about him while he was alive. A 1976 feature in People magazine was the closest. It hinted at his personal life by talking about Stan Finesmith, who was Lynde's hairdresser, sweetheart, and chauffeur bodyguard. A picture of Finesmith working on Lynde's hair was also included in the story. In terms of the coded language used at the time, this was as far as the major press would go. Later, an essay on the Biography Channel's website said that in the 1970s, entertainment writers didn't usually look into the personal lives of game show hosts. This meant that Lynde could keep most of his personal life out of the public eye. A history of Paul Lynde called His Life, His Loves, and His Laughter was written by Lynde's longtime friend Kathy Rudolph in 2018. In an interview, Rudolph said that Lynde found it frustrating to have to hide the fact that he was gay. Frank Rudolph says Lynde never really came out, not to the world or even to people close to him. This stress, along with the intense scrutiny and demands that were put on public figures in the middle of the 14th century, probably made him more prone to mood swings and depression behind the scenes. It was hard for him to keep up a public image that didn't show who he really was, and that inner struggle often came to the surface in private. His money and success gave him the tools to make a safe place for himself, even if it was only temporary. With the money he made from Hollywood Squares and other TV appearances, Lynde bought the old Hollywood home of movie star Errol Flynn. It was a huge farm that became both a symbol of his success and a place where he could be alone. He put a lot of time and money into remodeling and decorating, making it a luxurious hideaway that he shared with his beloved dog Harry McAfee, instead of a partner. They were always together, and Harry gave Lynde a rare kind of comfort in a life that was often filled with loneliness. When Harry died in 1977, Lynde was so upset that he could no longer stand to live in the house. He left quickly because he couldn't stand the quiet space that was left behind. Lynde not only had mental problems, but he also had physical ones. He had a problem with his weight all his life. When he finished from high school, he was said to weigh 250 pounds. He was able to lose weight and live a better life afterward, but the subject was still touchy. The same year Lynde lost Harry, 1977. Weight Watchers gave him an award for his personal change, which was briefly seen by the public. Taking note of a personal victory. Let us now talk about Paul Lynde's will. The actor and comedian Paul Lynde lived in a beautiful Italian-style house in the Sunset Doheny neighborhood of Los Angeles in the 1920s. It was one of his most famous and historically important homes. Lynde saw more in this beautiful home than just real estate. It was a big moment in his career that showed how he became famous in Hollywood and how much he wanted to live in the glamour and mystery of old movies. The house had a lot of old Hollywood charm before Lynde bought it. It used to belong to the famous swashbuckling actor Errol Flynn. The house had a romantic, decadent feel to it, and some of its architectural features reminded me of homes on the Italian Riviera. When Lynde moved in, the house was already famous for having been owned by famous people, but he saw promise in more than just the walls and gardens. Lynde wanted to make it his own, so he hired the famous builder John Elgin Wolfe to redesign the house to suit his tastes and make it even more impressive. Wolfe was a favorite of Hollywood's elite and was known for his dramatic but elegant style, which mixed classic European styles with the clean lines of Hollywood Regency. With Wolfe's help, the house was changed in a tasteful way. It still had a Mediterranean feel to it, but it was updated with light classical touches and interior flourishes that showed off Lynde's flashy and dramatic personality. The end result was a house that was both formal and fun, classy but never stiff. The comedian turned it into a safe haven where he could welcome guests, get away from public life, and be alone with nature and quiet. The estate had 3 main bedrooms, each with its own unique style, as well as 2 different guest quarters, which were perfect for Lynde's many friends and family who come to visit. The outside areas were just as nice. Well-kept gardens, lush courtyards, and decks with lots of shade that gave a view of the hills nearby. The villa was not only Lynde's home but also a mirror of his love of beauty and drama. It was a symbol of his fame and the world he had worked hard to join, even though his personal problems often made people doubt his fame. Lynde bought this house in Los Angeles. It was his first big piece of real estate there, and it changed the way he lived and how people saw him. For a man who had grown up in the Midwest and dealt with insecurity and the limits of his upbringing, having a famous piece of Hollywood history was a statement. Paul Lynde had shown up. Even though he was most often seen on TV and in shows, his home was a place where he could be himself and express himself freely, artistically and comfortably. Even after Lynde's death in 1982, the house continued to be interesting because of its historical and artistic value. In the end, it was put on the market and sold for almost $1.3 million stuck in Polier, which shows how popular it is. In 2002, many years after Lynde had last walked those rooms, it sold for almost that much. But for people who remember him, the villa is still a symbol of a star's complicated search for beauty, comfort, and a place to join, both for his unforgettable wit on Hollywood squares and for the struggles that lay behind the laughs. In a town where the light rarely goes out but the clouds can last for a long time. Next, Paul Lynde's most famous and expensive home was the Hollywood Regency-style house at 9050 Cordell Drive, which was high up in the exclusive Bird Street neighborhood of Beverly Hills West. This house not only showed Lynde's serious and comedic sides, but it also showed how he went from being a struggling actor to a Hollywood insider. With a view of the whole city of Los Angeles, the farm was a rare combination of privacy, stunning views, and high-class architecture. A great place for one of the most famous and mysterious TV characters to be. John Elgin Wolfe, the famous builder known for building dream homes for Hollywood's elite, carefully redesigned this Cordell Drive home, as well as his previous villa in the Sunset Doheny area. Wolfe's signature touches, flowing lines, high-gloss glamour, and theatrical symmetry turned the house into a stunning bachelor pad that fit Lynde's wild and colorful way of life. The end result was a palatial escape that was both sophisticated and fun, like a mid-century camp, a true picture of Lynde himself. The estate was a big house with 3 bedrooms and 4 to 5 bathrooms, based on how the rooms were set up. The main living rooms are defined by wood-paneled ceilings, built-in bookcases, and floor-to-ceiling windows that add both warmth and drama. Interior designer Reginald Adams gave each room a well-chosen air of elegance. His finishing touches stressed comfort wrapped in vintage glamour. High-end appliances and handmade cabinetry were in the gourmet kitchen. Classic furniture, mirrored surfaces, and soft lighting were used in different rooms to impress guests without being too showy. The real magic of 9250 Cordell Drive, though, was outside. The focal point of the backyard was a trapezoidal swimming pool, an unusual shape that is rarely seen in home plans. A cabana was right next to the pool and would be great for summer parties, quiet getaways, or talks by the pool under the stars. There was plenty of room for guests in the guest house, and Lynde's on and off attempts to stay healthy were shown in his private gym. The grounds were finished off with a gated motor court that gave the famously private and sometimes reclusive star full privacy. It was more than just a house. It was its own stage where Lynde could entertain guests, meet people from the business world, and get away from the stresses of public life. Lynde was known for his flamboyant wit on Hollywood squares and for stealing scenes in movies and shows, but he also had problems with his sexuality, alcoholism, and the loneliness of typecasting. He could temporarily put on the character and just live as Paul on this estate, which was full of beauty, luxury, and his beloved dog Harry McAfee. The sad truth is that Lynde was found dead in this house in January 1982, having died of a heart attack at the age of 55. The farm, which will always be connected to him, changed hands several times over the next few decades. Moby, the singer, bought the house and loved its movie like Bones and lived there later on. The house sold for about 3.8 cents in 87.5 million in 2016, which shows how valuable it is as a building and how important it is to Hollywood history. The house at 9250 Cordell Drive is still a beautiful sight in the Bird Streets. Along with being a fancy home, it is also a memorial to Paul Lynde's larger-than-life presence, both on TV and in real life. It's a house that shows how contradictory his work has been. It's always a little bit dramatic, big but personal, glamorous but very close to home. Another little-known fact about Paul Lynde is that he had a youth. He was the 5th of 6 children born to Sylvia Bell, née Dupe, and Hoy Corridon Lynde. They were a hard-working couple who ran a meat market in the middle of Mount Vernon. Lynde grew up in a simple Midwestern home during the Great Depression. He learned early on how important it was to be strong and funny, traits that would later shape both his work and the way he deals with stress. The Lynde family lived in a busy, close-knit neighborhood. Paul had 3 brothers, Richard Hoy, Corridon George, Cordy, and John Johnny, who was the youngest.
His sisters were Grace and Helen. Among them, Paul had a special place in his heart for Cordy. Cordy was one of the best athletes and most interesting people in town. Paul looked up to him and wanted to be like him. But tragedy struck in 1944 when Cord, who was only 21, was killed in the Battle of the Bulge during World War II. Lynde would never get over that loss. He would later keep pictures of his beloved brother for a long time after they were grown up. A quiet honor to a person who had been very important to him as a child. In the same year, 1944, Paul graduated from Mount Vernon High School. It was there that he first showed signs of his knack for theater. That being said, he wasn't quite the class clown yet, but he was active in school and played bass drum in the high school band, which put him right in the beat of public performance. Even back then, his unique "Ofard get up, look 'em." His friends and teachers were impressed by his dramatic voice and delivery. Not long after graduating, Lynde left his small Ohio town to follow his dreams in a bigger world. He went to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, which is one of the best places in the country for drama and speech. There he met people who would become famous in the future. Cloris Leachman, Charlotte Ray, Jeffrey Hunter, Patricia Neal, and Claude Akins were all his classmates. All of them went on to have successful jobs in Hollywood or on stage. Lynde did very well in this place where there was a lot of ability and drive. He got involved in the university's plays and developed the emotional style and comedic timing that would become the hallmarks of his professional work. He also joined the Upsilon chapter of Phi Kappa Sigma here. Phi Kappa Sigma is a social club that is known for having some very famous alumni. Lynde is still named as one of its most famous members, but he had some hard times while he was at Northwestern. In 1949, not long after graduating from high school in 1948, Paul lost someone else very important to him. In the space of 3 months, both of his parents passed away. Losing the most important people in his family just as he was getting ready to make his mark on the world changed him forever. Even though he was going through a lot of personal grief, Lynde kept going. He had a degree in speech and drama, a group of talented friends, and natural ability that didn't follow the rules. He was driven by a dream to entertain. Lynde came to the city with nothing but his drive and the funny side that had already made him stand out in college. He was determined to break into show business. Like many ambitious performers at the time, he worked a lot of odd jobs to make money while he waited for the right chance to show off his skills. In this early stage, Lynde worked on his sharp sense of humor and observational wit. He would often test new material in small clubs and social groups. Some people gave him a chance to do stand-up comedy at the famous dinner club No. 15th Avenue, which is frequented by New York's upper class. This was his big break. There, people were drawn to Lynde's flashy stage demeanor, one-of-a-kind voice, and sarcastic deadpan delivery. His show was a mix of highbrow camp and everyday frustration, which made him stand out in a city full of talented people. He really took off when he was cast in the Broadway revue's New Faces of 1952. Both critics and audiences loved the show, and it was the start of the careers of many famous actors, including Earth Kit, Robert Clary, Alice Ghostly, and Carol Lawrence. Lynde's most remembered performance in the revue was the monologue Trip of the Month Club, in which he played a sarcastic, helpless man on crutches who told the story of the strange and funny things that happened to him and his wife on an African safari. Lynde's trademark skill is to turn a seemingly easy story into a funny tour de force by building up the frustration, timing it perfectly, and using biting irony. Because of how well the revue did, a movie version called New Faces was made and put in theaters in 1954. This gave Lynde even more publicity. After his success on Broadway, Lynde moved on to TV, but the first few episodes weren't as good. In 1956, he co-starred in the short-lived sitcom Stanley with Buddy Hackett and Carol Burnett, who were both new comedians at the time. Even though the show was only on for 1 season, it helped Lynde get jobs in the future and showed him to TV viewers. In the same year, he was a guest on NBC's The Martha Raye Show, which added to his image as a versatile comedian. Lynde went back to Broadway in 1960 to play Harry McAfee, the overprotective and nervous dad in Bye Bye Birdie. This part would become one of his most famous. The part played to all of Lynde's skills, including his great sense of when to laugh, his ability to show lovable annoyance, and the campy way he says things. Lynde played the lead part again in the 1963 movie version of the stage hit, which became one of the movie's most memorable songs. It became his unofficial signature song. In the same year, he put out his first and only comedy record, which was just recently released, and has 6 songs that Lynde wrote himself. At that point, he was still using his own material, but as he became more famous, he started to depend on professional writers, until he needed to use his improvised skills again when he was on the Hollywood squares. By the beginning of the 1960s, Lynde was a regular on TV. He was a regular on NBC's The Perry Co. Show as a part of the Kraft Music Hall Players from 1961 to 1962. He shared the stage with comedians Don Adams, Kay Ballard, and Sandy Stewart. After that, he made a lot of guest appearances that made his voice, face, and sarcastic attitude instantly familiar to people in America. Classic shows like The Farmer's Daughter, The Monsters, The Flying Nun, Gidget, I Dream of Jeannie, and F Troop all had memorable parts that people will remember. Lynde's parts often played characters that took advantage of his unique mix of flamboyance and frustration. He often played tense neighbors, frustrated uncles, or hilariously bad guys. His showy, fussy character, which was never named but always easy to spot, added comic energy to every set he walked onto. In addition to TV, Lynde was in a number of plays that were popular at the time. In two important movies from the 1960s, Send Me No Flowers, 1964, and The Glass Bottom Boat, 1966, he worked with Doris Day. In these films, he played supporting parts that added depth and charm to typical love stories. Lynde brought something new to these movies. Not the main character, but the smart watcher, the crazy friend, or the funny guy with a bite. As the 1960s came to a close, Paul Lynde had become one of the most sought-after character players in America. He was a unique performer because he could easily move between stage, screen, and studio. He could charm a live theater audience, bring life to a sitcom, and leave a lasting impression in even the smallest film part. All of this came from the tough, determined years after college, when Paul Lynde's skill and drive in the New York theater world made him famous across the country. What do you think about Paul Lynde? Please tell us what you think in the box below. We hope this video was helpful for you. Kindly click like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Glad you watched, and see you in the next film. Thank you.